But for, thank you. So for sustainability and transportation and STEM, when we did a piece of work last year for the Scottish Government, for the Rural Directorate, and we looked at the National Transport Strategy through a rural lens, one of the big asks, and we had 6 big asks, one of the big asks related to STEM and acknowledging the fact that transport in general across the board lacks opportunity, lacks width and breadth and depth of individuals coming forward. So how can we look at the skills gap? Now, many of us on the call have been involved in the industry for a very long time and know this isn't anything new. So this was great to see in this strategy document come out. So big ask 5 was, we will create a STEM challenge. So we thought, how do we go about getting some funding for this to be able to make this actually happen? And thanks to the Rural and Islands Communities Ideas and Action Fund, we applied in December, well, late November last year, December, and found out just before Christmas that we had received some money to do a 3-month project. So it had to finish by the end of March. So as I say, the aim was to do a STEM challenge. However, over the 3 months, we undertook various different exercises. One of them was some desktop research, and all of this is in the report that has either landed in your inbox, is going to land in your inbox. And as you go through the desktop research and you start speaking to people, which is what we did, and then we went to Orkney and did a visit, you start to realise, like rural transport, there's a lot going on in STEM, but it's just not online to find out about. So by talking and chatting with people, we started to really build up some examples, which we'll share with you in a minute. As a result of doing all this speaking and desktop, we were able to make a stakeholder map, which I've put together for you here on the right-hand side. So these are people that are involved in STEM at all different levels. So whether you're a youth organisation, a community organisation, whether you're a Rotary club, whether you're a government organisation, or whether you're a science hub, particularly in Glasgow, there's a lot going on out there. So we put together the stakeholder map to help direct how we would pull together people for the online workshop. And some of you were involved in that online workshop. Jenny, being Jenny, had some creative ways of doing things. So we had story cubes that we were working on, and it was really dynamic. And from that, we were then able to pull together a bigger piece, what we call the State of Knowledge Review, which is looking through all the case studies that are out there that we collected and that you had told us either by an informal interview or by an online workshop. So what I'm going to do is just share the key findings that we had. Okay, so on the right-hand side here, you can see Academy 9, Scottish Chariots, the Girls on Track programme, Racing for All, Kids Pack done by First Bus. These were the ones that we found out about through word of mouth and through some desktop research. Now, majority of these are in Scotland. The team will be able to tell you that I think it's about 600 plus STEM projects that exist throughout the whole of the UK. But when you're looking at transport and sustainability, this is the ones. Equally, when you start to look at rural, there is very little, whether you're talking about rural transport, rural housing, rural health, rural education. The role of rural within STEM really isn't a strong theme. So the case studies that we focused on, which you will see more detail on in the report, is the first one is the Jim Clark Trust Chariot Racing, and the Royal Navy also are involved with this. And these are, for want of a better description, cars that are kits that schools, scouts, organisations can buy. In this case, in some of the cases, the Royal Navy are actually working with some schools and they're buying the kits and they're also providing the support for the young people. The Jim Clark Trust has started a championship and they're using kart tracks up and down the length of Scotland, whether it's East Fortune on the East Coast or if it's Boyndy, Banffshire up in Aberdeenshire, to try and encourage young children, whether it's primary or secondary, to get involved in designing these chariot cars. And personally, I've been quite involved in this. I was at a Jim Clark event last year in June in the Borders, and it was refreshing to see schools were taking on board the English department to write up press releases and to do their social media. They were taking the design element to be able to do the livery and to do the artwork on it. They were bringing in the maths. They were bringing a whole load of different departments were being involved, pulling that together. But then there was equally scouts and local organisations doing this. So businesses have been involved, and Royal Navy has been involved, providing support to help these young people bring what are battery, solar, green power cars to life. We've included Children's Health Scotland here. We had a cafe with Children's Health Scotland earlier in the year. And what we really liked about their offering is the way that you can self-refer and how you can be involved actively, and how they sent out kits and packs to young people. And although it may not be directly STEM, the model on which it's based is something that we should look at really strongly for particularly a rural area. Scottish Government and the NHS fund Children's Health Scotland at the moment, and they reckon that the pack that they send out, which includes water bottles, envelopes which have weekly numbers because it's all run online, so you get activities to do online, costs roughly £50 per young person to do. So again, we've included this information in the report so you can get an idea of what's going on. One programme that we had no idea about and came about randomly as a result of me being on BBC Radio Scotland talking about the A9. I went, as you do on a Friday night, and put in A9 STEM into Google, and the Academy 9 came up. So for those of you that are very involved with the A9 and know the A9, there is a slight silver lining to the fact it's all delayed, because it does mean we have more STEM going on up the A9 for our young people. But the Academy 9 has a wide range of offerings, whether it's opportunities to go and visit sites, learn about biology, and whether it's about site visits to actual infrastructure, and it's up and down the whole A9 in and out of schools. So again, very difficult to find online, but came about through informal interviews. Another one is based in Orkney, and this is at Heriot Watt. And for those of you who are at the gathering, this received an award at the gathering, because what they're trying to do is show that you can do net zero on the school run and try and reduce emissions. But they're also looking at buildings and infrastructure. So it's a much bigger piece, but it starts with the school run. Matt's not here today, but he went and he spoke to the team there and saw what was going on. So you'll get the full details in that report. We've also got the Young Islanders Network. They've got a transport questionnaire. It started out as a paper questionnaire that they gave to young islanders to ask them about transport in their area, what they'd like to see improved, how they'd like to see it improved, and what they could do to improve it. This is now moved to an online solution to try and get more engagement and to reach more people. And then finally, we've got Informing Choices and Inspiring Futures, which is based up in Shetland, which brings in Skills Development Scotland and is working very closely with a lot of the schools in the area. I'll keep brief now because I know I'm waffling on, but there's a lot of text in the report for you to read on those case studies. When we ran the workshop, if you weren't there, we had about 4 or 5 key questions that we wanted to ask. We asked, is the current array of identified STEM projects, are they fit for purpose? Do they accommodate young people? Do they think about rural areas? As you can tell from the conversation earlier on, they're not necessarily so fit for purpose for rural. I can give you some examples of people traveling an hour and a half to just go one way to go and access a Wednesday evening session with actual practical kits to do chemistry. And then it's an hour and a half back. So this isn't exactly fit for purpose. Are there any gaps in the STEM offerings? And if so, how do we fill them? Is this about looking at something hybrid? I think the team and I would admit that we were very surprised, given a pandemic, that there wasn't a lot more available online. What are the known challenges to STEM? Fundamentally, at the moment for schools, it is the lack of resources, it's the lack of staff time, it's been strikes, it's been a pandemic. Some schools are saying they're not going to be doing STEM projects and taking on extracurricular clubs until 2025, 2026 because of the situation. So really the challenges in schools are a lot higher than those out with in organisations in the communities. What are the preferred methods for delivering STEM? I'll come on to this in one minute. Again, that could be everything from a practical kit to debate to having online questionnaires. How have they actually rolled things out? But equally with all of this comes an opportunity. So what are the offerings that we can make happen? How can we make this happen? And that's why you're here today. Because one of the things that we've looked at is we've spoken and got in touch with over 50 organisations. And it seems wrong not to be able to harness that, to take that forward, to make a change. So here are just some of the insights. I'm not going to share all of them because otherwise you won't read the report, and it really is worth reading. But the one on the left-hand side shows you the different types of activities that are out there. And predominantly, as you can tell, it's about kits and practical. And that comes with it the challenges. If it's not in the school, you've got to post it out, you've got to have the finance to do it, you've got to have the instructions to do it, and you've also got to have the people contact to be able to do it. So a lot of it was not, I repeat, was not hybrid. It was very much in person. You did have field trips, and a number of organisations also ran annual competitions, and that's up and down the country, not just in Scotland. Where do you tend to find STEM? Well, this is probably unsurprising, was engineering and general science. But as I mentioned earlier on with the A9 and with the Jim Clark, biology and ecology, really important aspects of STEM, particularly when you're looking at infrastructure building and the impacts. So there's a couple of more diagrams in the report, but I just thought I'd share a flavour of a few of them. So I'm now going to pass on to Lynda, because I think she's joined us. Lynda helped, as did Matt, with this report. And Lynda's going to speak to you about the recommendations. What we did was we looked at a pathway. We've called it the Big Ask 5 pathway. So you've got recommendations, and then I'll conclude with talking about the stepping stones. So Lynda, I can't see you, but could you unmute and introduce yourself, please?
Yes, good morning, everyone. Hello. I've just joined you from the school run, so sorry I was late. Yes, so following on from the research we did and the workshop, we came up with the 4 recommendations. Recommendation 1, improved communication and coordination. So Education Scotland does have a database of STEM activities. It's a fairly comprehensive database. It's searchable, filterable by age, type of activity, you know, the field and the discipline, but there doesn't seem to be very good awareness of it or usage of it. And it took my research partner and I quite a long time to come across this. So thanks for bringing that up, Jenny. So, and as well as events like this, also a lot of the companies do have STEM ambassadors doing whatever they're doing in their corners, and it's about bringing the ambassadors together, finding out who they are, and building on the opportunities that can provide. The next recommendation is procurement opportunities, because in 2014 there was legislation passed that said tenders over a certain threshold had to have wider community benefits. And some of the infrastructure projects that are going ahead have requirements for built-in requirements for STEM outreach. But it was one of the workshop attendees who highlighted this opportunity for us. It's like, we're not sure whether these activities are audited, if they're monitored, whether there's any checking going on as to what's actually going, and neither is there any forward planning as part of the tender process system as to what could be useful to target. So I think one of the actions that we have for over the summer is a few FOI requests to find out more data as to what exactly is going on and how this can be improved. Third recommendation, keeping it local. Again, the research found that things that are local to where children live and study are a lot more relevant to them. So one of the recommendations is to focus on STEM type employment, STEM activities going on around the schools and regions of the children that we are trying to reach. Recommendation 4 is just to do not reinvent the wheel. As a lot of people know, there's a lot going on out there. A lot already happening. And yeah, we are a small team of 3.5, 4 people. So just build on what there is and don't reinvent the wheel.
Thank you, Lynda. I don't think these are probably new to many people, but it really is a strong theme that you don't need to create your own STEM challenge. There are ones out there. And if you want to take them and adapt them to keep it local and work with, say, a local ferry operator or a CT organisation or bike community programme, that's the way to go about it. Don't reinvent the wheel is very much the message on this. And the procurement side of things, is quite startling, and I think there's a few of you on the call that may be taking this away, that we've looked briefly into it, and there are a few contracts in particular we've looked at, and the STEM contribution is very significant, but we cannot find any end output for it actually being committed to. So there's always the rhetoric and the practice, isn't there? And at the bottom here, we've aligned ourselves with the UN Sustainable Goals. So finally, before you guys get to chat, I mentioned stepping stones. So we had a big ask. That was the first report we did last year. And this time we're now looking at stepping stones and the pathway for this. So as I mentioned, we have over 50 organisations that we are liaising with, and we're going to call this the Scottish Sustainable Transport STEM Cluster, which, as you've come along today, you're going to be part of. And that's just really to keep the conversations going and to allow for that communication and coordination to take forward. The aim and objective is to design and deliver a rural sustainable transport STEM challenge framework, a bit of a mouthful for this morning. But to be honest, to do a challenge, I think the first thing we need to be doing is actually sharing what I call a framework. Examples of, if you want to do a practical kit and you happen to be in Orkney, this is where you go and who you go and speak to. If you're down in Dumfries and Galloway and you want to do a competition and it's on let's say ferries, then we will produce this. It's more like taking an Excel spreadsheet and giving you some columns to actually look at so that you can cherry pick what's available close to you that you can then use, rather than, as we say, reinventing the wheel. We do, however, want to design and deliver a sustainable transport challenge, particularly for rural areas. And as has been exemplified, there isn't anything really there on the rural side. So this needs to be something that will be probably online, possibly hybrid, but bearing in mind that this is about equality for all. It's not about being able to afford Play-Doh in the house or being able to go out and buy particular aspects to be able to complete a challenge. So we're trying to keep this completely accessible and maybe use everything that people have at home. And as a rural person, and some of you are too, I can tell you my child has access to weird and wonderful things because we've got 15 acres of land. So there could be bits of pipe kicking around, bits of wood kicking around, whereas somebody in a very small holding may not have any of that, or maybe is living in a small town and doesn't have access to that, so they could use recycling. So we're going to design and look at this. So if you want to be involved with that, that would be fantastic. Stepping stone 4 is to work closer with organisations such as Scottish Rural Action, Transport Scotland, Scottish Government, to make sure that we actually get a voice heard about rural when it comes to STEM activities, because it really isn't out there. So we need to make that voice heard. And that's part of your responsibility for being here as well, is can you take it back to your organisations and your networks and say, what do we do about rural for STEM going forward? And obviously, really key to this is to continue fostering connections with youth organisations and groups. There is no point doing something for young people if young people aren't involved, and we have had young people involved in this. We can design everything we want, but if they don't want to adopt it, it doesn't work. So having young people at the core of this is absolutely key. So those are our 5 stepping stones, and that is the direction that we're going to be going. So I'm now going to stop sharing, because it's over to you. You can ask questions, you can make suggestions, you can share what you know. We are recording this so that we can capture some of this, because I can't write as quickly as I talk. So I'll throw the floor open because I don't see